The number one draft pick, is it still Kayvon Thibodeaux? Is there anything changing? We're going to get into that first. Then Justyn Ross and the evolution of an injury and how you get from a lost season to an NFL career. What is the process going into the NFL draft? And lastly, how does a fired coach affect his players and their joining either an NFL team, a trainer to try to get ready for the combine? What does that do to derail a prospect's life going into the NFL draft? We're going to cover all that and more here on Locked On NFL Draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On NFL Draft. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan Tracy, and we want to thank y'all for making us your first listen of the day. Ryan, man, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited about this part of the season, right? Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We're going to have shows for you here another couple of days this week. We're going to take Thursday off, but want to say enjoy your holiday. And this is about in a normal cycle when I'm not doing a year-round draft show, right? This is just about when I start making requests, trading people for all 22. This is where it usually starts to kick up for me.
So speaking of kicking up, man, and you got Kayvon Thibodeaux, and he's been for sure the number one draft prospect. That he's going number one overall, especially in the class where he's not that guy at the quarterback position. I think he sticks out even more. But this past weekend, Oregon was really dominated by Utah. And some people, especially on my time, started to point out some areas where Thibodeaux might need to improve. And it was mainly the run game, where he's just been a non-factor and kind of getting pushed around down there. Are we starting to look at Thibodeaux through, a different lens and maybe a guy who can't be an every down, like 4-3 end and might have to specifically be drafted to more of a 3-4 style defense?
It's possible. I've started getting a lot of that the last couple of weeks. The USC contest where he got run on pretty good. I think he got optioned a couple times as well. Like, it's not just about the physicality part, right? It's about the discipline to man and set that edge in the run game too. But that said, it's the run game. We all know what's going on at the NFL. There are certain teams in college that are going to run maybe twice as many carries in the season as an NFL team. So we might be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but you're right. I'm hearing more in the wind from people that do this for a living, that track college prospects. I'm hearing a lot more from fans. For me, the big standout that I've been kind of waiting for all season is that I want Kayvon Thibodeaux to just take over a game. And I haven't seen that kind of dominance that made me just go, okay, he can get to the next level and just have one of those nights like we saw Chris Jones have on Sunday Night Football, like one of those kind of things. Like, you have to be able to get to that point, I think, to be in consideration for the number one overall pick.
Well, he did have that one dominant game against UCLA where he had multiple sacks and he was like wreaking havoc off of the edge. But again, that's in the passing game. And I think people know just the raw, pure ability that he has as an edge rusher. And I think that's what people are going to value most. I started to kind of think back a couple of years ago. There was a really good class where you had Nick Bosa, you had Cleveland Farrell. You also had a guy named Josh Allen. And Josh Allen, I remember watching him. Josh Allen, you had Brian Burns in that class as well. But Josh Allen specifically was someone who everyone loved. And you see the size, you see the ability, you see the raw athleticism. But the one area I thought he needed to improve on was probably more so in the run game. I think early on in his NFL career, had double-digit sacks as a rookie. I think he's doing well again. I don't think people care so much about defending the run with your 4-3 ends. And again, people are going to point to that with Kayvon Thibodeaux. But I think at the NFL level, it's really all about, can you get to the quarterback? Can you make plays from there? They'll try to figure out different ways to kind of manufacture run stops.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And they're going to give him a little bit more support, and they're going to give him some leeway because of what he can do against the pass. And I think you brought up UCLA. That's a good point. I don't know that the matchup there was anything that I'm projecting to the NFL level, but just trying to say, you know what I mean? It's going to be about, can you get around the edge? And he certainly has the explosive part of it. I think he's got enough anchor from what I've seen live. When I get the 22 and I can really dig in, I'll have a better idea. But I think it's that evolution of the pass game and the volume of passes that we're seeing in NFL games that's what it's going to come down to. As long as you get to the quarterback, he's going to be fine. I just don't know that there's a quarterback, and I think probably quarterback is the only other position that could leapfrog him at this point in the eyes of the scouts, but we'll find out.
Maybe offensive line, but like I can't remember who I heard talk about this, but they said especially at the top of the draft, you're looking for three things. One, a guy who can protect the quarterback. Two, obviously a quarterback, and that should be first. But the other guy is someone who can get after a quarterback. All right. So the quarterback is involved in all three of these, whether you're protecting them, getting after them, or you are the quarterback. And he's one of those pieces right there that I think will be really pivotal in the draft come that time. I think the only person that can leapfrog him is probably an offensive tackle that people really think highly of. When I look at Thibodeaux, one thing that I like to go with, especially at the top, right? You're looking for these freakish athletes with high upside, is what can I teach? What can't I teach? I think his length, his size, his speed, his bend, just that raw ability coming off of the edge, it's really difficult to teach that, right? And even then, you could teach some of the hand fighting and things like that. That's going to make him even more desirable. But you also can teach him certain things to help him against the run. So I'm assuming the NFL, when they go to, look at him and they're going to kind of value this type of prospect, is really going to be all about what can't they teach? And I think it's how he gets after the quarterback.
Yeah, and those natural abilities there that his mom gave him that we didn't,
Right. So, speaking of raw abilities, we have a receiver here, Justyn Ross, who has declared for the NFL draft. We're talking about the senior receiver out of Clemson, and he lost a year due to an injury. So he could have came back because of he probably could have gotten a medical redshirt year. Then they had the COVID year. So he really didn't have to come out. Yeah, he could play a couple more years, but another injury. Now, this is coming off of after his freshman year, 1,000-yard season as a freshman, played next to T. Higgins. That was awesome. Sophomore year, had another solid season, almost 1,000 yards, had another, 10 touchdowns or so, like 8 touchdowns, I believe it was. And then after that year, that was when he had the back injury. So he had to get the spinal fusion surgery. And that was something I'm like, man, like, is this guy going to come back from back surgery? I don't know. Back surgery just scares the hell out of me.
I don't
All right, with his back, neck injuries, like those things, I'm like wary of it. DK Metcalf, he had the neck thing, and I was like, yeah, that's scary. All right, but then he ends up kind of coming back this year, and he's doing well. Look at his numbers: 47 catches, 524 yards, 3 touchdowns, and that's with his quarterback DJ
Ugalele.
Yeah, there we go, Ugalele. He's having kind of a down year. So Justyn Ross, he's kind of been, between him, number 80, I believe his last name is Rogers, I believe, but number 80, they've kind of been carrying this whole thing. Production maybe not as good as he would have liked, and maybe the quarterback position has something to do with that. But he has a stress fracture in his foot, and he elects early on to just say, you know what, I'm going to just opt out from the rest of this season, get this surgery, and prepare for the NFL draft. Do you think that whether it's his past injury history or what's going on now will ultimately affect him as an NFL draft prospect?
I think it will always go into the evaluation. Like, it's going to be part of it. But this is actually what got me thinking about, how do these guys go when things aren't going well? Like, you don't have the opportunity to play out your last year or to put your best foot forward, whether it's the coaching thing we'll talk about in a bit or an injury-plagued couple of seasons like this. For me, I think the talent's there. You can see it on film when he is healthy. And a foot stress fracture like this, I think it's smart of him to shut it down now and be able to get it corrected, get it rested, and get ready for the combine, get ready for the pre-draft process that I think you have to go through, and you have to explain some of the medical conditions and how you dealt with it, how you rehabbed. I think the work ethic at rehab is going to be a bigger portion of it than maybe in players with similar injuries in the past because of the history. And the spinal thing, I agree with you, that makes me nervous as well. But I think there's no doubting that right now, if he does get back to full health, he's a guy with a lot of talent that is well under the radar of this wide receiver class right now.
Well, you talked about this wide receiver class, and his head coach, Dabo Swinney, came out and was like, hey, he's NFL ready. He doesn't need to come back. He's fine. Go to the NFL, Justyn Ross. You're going to do just fine. But when you look at this class, and we've talked a lot about this receiver class and some of the really special talent you have, whether it's, Garrett Wilson, Olave, Treylon Burks. I mean, the list goes on and on. Coming off of an injury, how's Justyn Ross going to kind of factor into those guys? Because even looking at them, I thought even if healthy, I don't think he's a top 5 prospect
Oh no,
receiver.
I wouldn't think
even,
so either.
Even with healthy, right? Like, and he's solid. He's a solid receiver, and I think he'll be a potential day 2 pick. But his head coach told him don't come back. But I actually think that maybe coming back would have maybe solidified him a little bit more on what he's able to do and take out a lot of the questions. Because again, they're going to look at him one as a prospect and just, how does he move? How does he run routes? What type of speed does he have? All those things on top of the, production and whatever, which he has that. He has the size, he has the ability, but they're going to look and see how does that stack up with the rest of this class and what does it look like? And I think when you look at these other guys, I mean, even guys I didn't even mention, like a Drake London, right? How does he stack up with a Drake London where they kind of play similar games, but Drake London is like 3 inches taller? Yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions, in the sense of where he stacks up with the rest of these guys that I'm not sure is going to work out in his favor like he thinks.
The only thing that I would say that would contradict that is if I were advising him, if I was training him and I realized that he has a chance to go now and still be a top 100 pick, and I do think he is in that realm. Day 2 is exactly where I think he is. I'm with you there. I think honestly the Drake London injury helps him a little bit because I think it lowers the concern bar overall for the whole process across the league, right? And lets them really dig into it. And if I'm him, I'm telling him it's better to go now and come out as a 3rd round prospect, get on a roster and start your career than it is to take a chance and have another injury at the college level without having gotten any of that done. So for him, I don't know there's much else that you can see him progressing towards next season with the quarterback situation, with the team as it is. I think this is the best decision for him. And I think it's a great value for those of you that want to talk about the GM side of this. There's a value there that you've seen what he can do on film. If you feel that it's correctable, and the medicals will reveal that, right? And you feel that you have a good training staff, you can help him keep himself healthy. This could end up being a steal of a talent that a year ago, if he'd come out, or 2 years ago, you just say he's a top 30 pick, right? And now if you still have the same talent level that you can massage into staying healthy, that's quite a value at, say, 87 or whatever.
Right. And there's another receiver that is actually coming back from an injury, and he's doing things kind of the opposite way. And that's George Pickens, receiver for Georgia. He's coming off of an ACL. He missed the first 10 games of this season. And he said, you know what? I'm coming back. And I'm assuming he's coming back because he's thinking about that draft and he wants people to just see him. Look, I'm healthy. I got my feet under me. The knee is okay. Don't worry about me. Let me go out and play these last few games. I think this is kind of his audition for the NFL. What do you kind of think about Pickens coming back this late in the year and probably, and I'm assuming you can let me know what you think about this, coming back right now because he's potentially wanting to enter the NFL draft?
Yeah, I mean, good for him for getting all the way back. The question for me would always be, are you healthy enough to be your best? Or are you still at 80%? Because then I don't think it's worth it. But I also think this also tells you a couple of things. If you're somebody in the scouting system, if you're working for a team, this tells you that he's clearly got a goal of getting in the NFL. He clearly wants to show his work ethic from rehab, which is something that happens. Everybody gets injured in the NFL. There's no way around it. But it also tells you that there's a national title here in the future for this team, right? He wants to be a part of that. He wants to help his team get there. Like, for me, obviously you get way more from an actual interview, from the outside looking without talking to the player. That tells me that he's motivated in ways that aren't necessarily just about him. And I like that as a guy trying to build a roster that I can win with.
Yeah, I like that too. And another thing that I like, man, is Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is around the corner. And we all know what that means, man, is football. And nothing goes better with football than a turkey and betting. And you know what? I'm not a turkey guy. I'm more of a ham guy. All right. But BetOnline
can't stuff a ham, dude.
No, man. Are you a turkey? Are you a turkey person?
Yeah, I'm a stuffing guy. That's what I am.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm definitely more of I like the honey glaze with the, with the pineapples and stuff like that. But anyways, BetOnline has you covered, just like the honey glaze over the ham. All right. And they have you covered during this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all sports action this Thanksgiving. So head over right now to the new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus using the promo code Locked On. And that's how you'll receive your bonus. All right. And it's not just football. I mean, you can bet on all the pro sports. You can bet on some college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, all that good stuff, and your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of this amazing offer that's good throughout the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. All right, that's BetOnline, where we are stuffed with details this Thanksgiving. All right, now some more details, and we wanted to get into the a head coach firing. How does that affect guys potentially with their draft status? And what is to do, not just for guys that are planning on leaving, but guys that are still there, right? And what does that do to their future as a prospect? So Dan Mullens fired after, being, whatever he was at Florida. He started this season 5-6. I swear, I feel like everything was all good just last year. He was like, Florida was pretty much a dominant team. They played extremely well. They, lost a few games or whatever, but the team was playing well. He had Kyle Trask. He was playing at a high level. And then they go into this season. They're 5-6. And we get the news Sunday. Boom, he's fired. Or they are parting ways. All right.
Right.
You look at some of the guys that he has handpicked to bring in. When he got the job at Florida, the first guy that he called, Emory Jones, brought him in at quarterback, right? Now you look at Emory Jones, and maybe, I don't know if Dan Mullens has failed to kind of really develop him or bring him along, but he's kind of been up and down. And now the guy that promised him the opportunity to really develop him and bring him along as a quarterback, he's out of there. So what does it mean for some of these younger guys, whether it's Emory Jones, whether it's Anthony Richardson, these guys that have these pro aspirations? I'm pretty sure it's a lot of those guys. What happens when your head coach is fired like this?
I mean, that's the hard part. You got to take stock. You have to figure out, what's the direction going? Like, you'll see a lot of leadership groups, older upperclassmen be consulted about this. It depends on your athletic department, but you have to buy into that. You have to engage. You can't, I think if you're in that situation and you're a guy that feels that you have a chance to get in the NFL, that you have to take it by the horns. You can't let just everything go by and see who the coach becomes and that kind of thing. I think you also have to then realize that you're there to win games with your team, but you're also there to put good film out. And at the end of the day, it's all going to come back down to the film. You mentioned a couple of players. I think the one for me is Elam, the DB, that I think preseason we heard in some really lofty spots in terms of rankings, a guy that I think is still going to be a high draft pick. But how do you recover from that? How do you put good film on tape when you're rudderless and you don't have a coach and you can't come up even with a solid defensive game plan to actually execute?
Well, I mean, this was something that happened just last year, and a couple of cornerbacks had this same dilemma that they were in, right? You look at the cornerbacks at South Carolina because Will Muschamp was fired in the middle of that year. So you had J.C. Horn and Izzy
Mukamara. No.
There we go.
Mukawamu. Sorry, Israel.
Yeah, Mukawamu. All right, so you had Izzy Mukawamu. There you go. All right, yeah, you had Izzy and J.C. Horn, who both said, wow, you guys are going to fire my head coach? I'm out of here. Right. And they decided to just go to the NFL right now. And it didn't really hurt J.C. Horn's draft stock. He was the first cornerback taken in the draft, number 8 overall, to the Carolina Panthers. Was having a good start to his rookie year until he fractured his foot. But Izzy, I think he was like a day 2 or early day 3 pick.
Yeah, and I think he ended up moving to safety as well, which I always thought was a good fit for him, to tell you the truth. So again, that is about the film and what we saw on there, right? It wasn't necessarily about, and maybe it's because they're DBs, I don't know, but it sends the whole program into upheaval. If you're a quarterback, if you're if you're a wide receiver that's talented, like, you're reliant on that staff to help you move forward. So does your OC become your head coach in the interim? Does the DC happen? Like, I think that also has a big outcome on how you prepare for the draft and how you make your decisions.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we're going to have to see. But I think I feel Elam, I'm not worried about him. I think regardless, he's put enough on film over these last few years as a starting cornerback for Florida Gators that, his evaluation is going to be fine. But I feel for the guys that are kind of still developing and the guys that are still trying to find their way. And those are the guys I feel like he hurts the most. The Emory Jones, what was the plan for him? The Anthony Richardson, what was the plan for him? And Richardson and Emory Jones, I think people are trying to figure out, which one is the guy, which one is going to be the starting quarterback. And when you have Dan Mullens there, who's responsible for bringing both of those guys in, he had a plan.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that plan is out the window now, and these guys in their future, especially as draft prospects, is kind of up in the air. Now, I guess it can be salvaged if you try to figure out, all right, they're bringing in a new staff. Let's try to figure out, how we can kind of salvage this situation. If you are Anthony Richardson, I want to ask you, if you were in his shoes, would you now look to potentially transfer maybe into the transfer portal and maybe go to a school where you have more of an established offense? Or do you say, you know what, we have everything we need here at Florida, I need to stay here and just figure out who they bring in and just go from there?
But do they? That's the question. Do we know who's going to take that over? Because right now I'm not convinced. I'm leaving my options completely open if I'm him. I'm looking at the portal. I'm considering who's in the opposite situation. What established offensive coach with a good system that I like just lost his quarterback to graduation or to early draft or whatever. Like I am making no commitments at this point until I understand what Florida's committing to.
Right. That's a great question. Great question. And we're going to, we're keeping an eye on that whole situation and what happens with that coaching situation at Florida. What happens with some of these younger guys, Emory Jones, Anthony Richardson, and these guys who will eventually be draft prospects. We're also going to be keeping an eye on some of these receivers that are coming out that we talked about today, Justyn Ross, George Pickens. How does their process really play out as the NFL draft process starts to kind of ramp up now? Now we're about to start getting into our real evaluations, and that's the part that I really live for. I can't wait to really dive in, watch film. You talked about trading film with guys. I know all about that, getting the all 22 and everything, but I think that's when we'll really be able to start ramping up, with this show. And we hope that you guys will stay tuned for all that. That stuff will be coming soon. But for now, that's going to be it for today's episode. We thank you for making us your first listen. From Croc, from Ryan, we are out.